Hey, what's going on, everybody? You are now tuned in to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, where we talk about all things related to life lessons, mental health, and the culture. I'm your host, Dr. Chanda. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I am here with a panel of three beautiful women making strides specifically in Women's History Month. Y'all, I cannot wait to get into this conversation because we were talking backstage, and I'm excited. I'm
I'm
excited.
excited.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
excited.
very
I don't know. I don't.
excited.
I don't. I don't feel qualified to be with this group of women, but we're gonna
Oh,
do what it do.
please. No.
Listen, all of y'all have like such dynamic backgrounds and bios. So if we can start with just some introductions into who you are and what you do, and we can start with Dr. Janice since she's at the top of my screen.
Well, thank you both for having us on. I'm so excited about this conversation. My name is Janice. I would say a connoisseur or I'm a Jane of all trades. I work with organizations and institutions to help them identify barriers that prevent the most marginalized employees from advancing. And I help those same workplaces remove those barriers. So a lot of the work that I do is around anti-racism education and helping workplaces figure out like what are the ways that our systems perpetuate bias and how do we fix our systems. So a lot of the work that I do is also a lot of writing. So writing is definitely my first love, and the writing that I do is around the same topic of anti-racism and creating better workplaces. And I am what else? I am a podcast host as well, and I think that's a good like background about me and some of the work that I do.
Nice. You didn't tell me you had a podcast. We were talking about podcasts backstage.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I always forget like little bits and pieces of, and people always say, oh, you should mention this. And yeah, so I have a podcast, 30 Diversity, where I talk about just a lot of the stuff that I write about and just some of the things that I see when I work with companies, and just sort of these like I guess like unmentionables for those of us who engage in any sort of equity work, like some of the things that come up when we're doing this work. So that is a little bit about me.
I love it. Thank you, Dr. Janice. Miss Essay, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes. So, born and raised in Kansas City, go Chiefs. Um, double HBCU grad, played volleyball for Hampton University, graduated from Florida A&M University College of Law. So, I am HBCU to the day I die.
Period.
Spent 7 NFL seasons as a lawyer between the NFL League Office and the Carolina Panthers. Started the Black Employee Resource Group there at the NFL. They had never had one before, called the Black Engagement Network. Also founded the Black Employee Resource Group Collective, the Black ERG Collective in New York, which is a conglomerate of Black ERGs across blue chip organizations. Um, and then I got bored and I went to go run a startup, House of Athlete, and we created the I Am Athlete podcast. We have fitness facilities where athletes were training, apparel, nutrition, everything. So was president of that company for almost 2 years. And then I
I
pivoted
love how she
again.
just casually says, I was president of a company.
He's like, and then,
No, they're all different experiences. Um, and then I recently moved to LA. I really wanted to work in TV and film. And so now I'm a lawyer for TV Plus, Apple TV Plus. So I get to work on marketing and publicity around all of our shows from a legal perspective. And yeah, I'm just somebody who's rooting for everybody Black and in particular Black women. And I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
Yes, me too. Just hearing like Dr. Janice's background and Essay's background, I'm just like bubbling over with just joy and emotion. Seeing Black women just like winning like this. Like, am I the only one experiencing this?
no, I always love being in community with Black women. It's
Yeah,
always very nourishing.
Oh
it
my
is, but it's also expected because what else
God.
would we be besides excellent?
Period.
Exactly.
Listen,
It's
you
listen, it's in our blood.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
All right, so last but not least, may I hear from Miss Chanelle Reynolds, who also happens to look like me because she's my twin. Y'all, funny story. Somebody on TikTok tagged me in one of her videos and was like, "Hey, did anybody ever tell you look like Chanda?" I'm like, who
no, they say you favor at paging Dr. Chanda.
who's going to tell them?
Who's gonna tell them?
Right. I love that.
That's hilarious.
Hi everyone, my name is Chanelle Reynolds, and I oversee all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for the Washington Commanders, which is an NFL team. I'm an HBCU graduate. I've been in the sport and entertainment industry over the past 8 or so years. While at the Commanders, I did start their first Black Employee Resource Group. Shout out to SA, because I was calling her, just trying to get the inside scoop, and she was prepping me like, yeah, make sure you say this and this. It was like, but I just want to acknowledge that because there was no gatekeeping. It was like, sis, I got you. I got your back while you go in to pitch this thing. So that was amazing. But yeah, that's all I do. I'm also a author. I'm a speaker, and I also have a podcast of my own, the Success Playbook Podcast.
Wow.
Listen, ladies. Yes, it's like so much of a lituation happening right now, and I'm so excited to get into this conversation. You ladies are like the first in your fields, right? The first person to do DE&I at the Commanders, the first person to do X, Y, and Z. I'm wondering, like, what has that been like, kind of overcoming those challenges of being the first Black woman in your field to overcome some of the obstacles that you had?
Ooh. I mean, for me, it was tough, right? So when I started the Black Engagement Network at the NFL, it was really in response to Philando Castile and Alton Sterling being killed, and we just were worn out, right? Like you could not turn on the television or open up Instagram without seeing Black bodies on the screen, and we didn't have a place to go. Like we had to come to work and like act like nothing was happening, and of course, no one was talking about it at work. And so we started, Ben, and then Trump is running for president, and that was a crazy time because he's saying all types of, problematic things. And then we have Colin Kaepernick kneeling. And so all this happened like in our first year. And so I really was thrown into the deep end because now I instantly became the voice of the Black people, while I'm fighting my own career battles. And so super rewarding. And I would do it because I felt like I had to do it for the people that didn't have my platform or my education or my proximity to leadership. But it wore me out. Like I was burnt out. Like by the time I got to the Panthers, I had a little bit left in the tank. I started the Black ERG there, but it's essential you have 2 jobs, and one is what you're getting paid for, and you're underpaid for that one. But for me, it was rewarding, and I love seeing the legacy that I left at the NFL. But it took its toll on me because you can become resentful for just having to fight for everything that you think we should have had in the first place.
That's so real. I love the transparency in that, acknowledging the emotion that comes with fighting this, and also like, resentment can come up, like while as I'm, going on with this fight. So I love that transparency there. Yeah.
For me, I would say I'm not the first to do this work. I think the ancestors and those who came before me have laid the groundwork. And even, I think each of us in different ways have done or engage in DEI work or equity work of any kind. But I know that when I started my consultancy in 5 years ago, almost, it was difficult because I didn't see any other Black women that were doing DEI consulting. Most of my friends work in corporate spaces or are consultants, right, for large companies. So I didn't have anyone that I could really look to and say, this is something I've always wanted to do. How do I go about doing this or that? So it was a lot to sort of navigate. And I felt like I had to mimic the people that were already doing this work that were not Black, right? It was mostly white people that I would see in these spaces. And so I was like, oh, I have to be like this. I have to, model my business like theirs. And at some point, probably after the murder of George Floyd, I was really like interrogating the way that I do this work. And I was realizing that I did not actually have the right focus in how I approached this work, as I was trying to mimic the white people I saw doing this work. And I was also trying to center whiteness in the way that I was doing the work. So I think that I had a realization myself in 2020 about my approach to this work. And I'm glad that I now find myself in community with so many Black folks specifically who do this work. And I think that keeps me accountable. And I think that keeps me honest. So I would say it was a challenge when I first started out, because I felt like I had to be like all these other people.
Right. Wow.
And I'll say for me, before I stepped into diversity and inclusion, I came from the sales and revenue generation side of sports. So when I left, I was like, oh, yes, like, cool. It's no more pressure over there on the sales side. Like, I don't have to be up late at night. I get to DE&I land, and it's like, wow, this is a little bit harder than sales, because each and every day you go in with the mindset like, yo, I got to fight the power. I got to fight the powers that be every time that I walk in the door. And for me, it was just a matter of like, I had to make sure that I created the right boundaries. And then also like finding that community, right? Finding people who I can, not necessarily dump on, but like I can just express, maybe what I'm going through or what I'm physically feeling, or even speak to people who have paved the way prior to me. Because yes, being the first for this organization, it can come with its challenges, but that's why I tap into, my surrounding network and those that support me. So,
yeah. It sounds like I'm hearing like a common theme, a common thread here, like making sure that we're relying on the support of the people around us, and even the support of like, the elders who came before us. Because at the end of the day, this work that y'all are doing, and I invited y'all all here for a reason. We all do like very similar work in that anti-racism space. But doing this work is exhausting. Right. It comes with such a emotional burden. And so it can be very difficult. That's why like leaning on our brothers and sisters is so important when attempting to do this. Dr. Janice, if I can kind of like hone in on you a bit, I know you have a very unique background in that you started as a professor, but you ended up leaving and going into, consulting. So I'm wondering what that journey was like for you. What led you to that?
Yeah, I know we were having conversation pre the start of this, but it's actually been a really fulfilling journey for me, because I always knew I wanted to do equity work. Like in 2011, I started a YouTube channel and I was talking about racism and my experiences as a Black woman just navigating the world, right? And what I went through. And it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. And I felt like, and I'm sure all of us have felt like this in different ways, Black women are often hyper scrutinized and over questioned. And I felt like I couldn't just stop at a bachelor's degree. I felt like I had to keep going because I wouldn't be taken seriously, right? So even if I started my consultancy and I have the knowledge and I have lived experiences, I felt like people would still sort of question me. So I felt like I need a master's. When I got the master's, I was like, I have to get a PhD because people will take me seriously. And in hindsight, I realized now I could have started the consultancy whenever I felt like it. Like, I don't think you need any sort of paper to say you can do this or you can't do this, as long as the passion and the desire to do the work is there. And, I've always felt like I was a educator at heart. Both of my parents are educators. And I know that I think both of you went to, I feel like Essay and Chanelle both mentioned they went to FAMU, right?
I went to Delaware State.
Oh, Delaware State. Okay.
I went to FAMU.
FAMU. Okay. So my dad has taught at a number of different HBCUs. So he's, Virginia State, Florida A&M, and all of the places. And so both of my parents are educators. And I always knew that I was an educator too at heart. And I felt like my place was in the classroom. And I'm actually really glad that I quit last July 2022. I quit because I'm seeing what's happening now and how it seems like there are a lot of topics. I would teach courses in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And just seeing now what's happening, I feel like my whole curriculum would have been attacked and I wouldn't have necessarily been able to teach the things that I was teaching. And I decided that I have this consultancy that I started after I graduated and I should pour into it 100%. And in doing that, I think I learned a powerful lesson of just trusting the direction that God is guiding me into. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of opportunities since I've left academia that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was still like teaching. And so I think it's so important that like if we feel like we're being led in a particular direction to just trust, even if we don't understand it, right? Because I was like, why would I leave a steady, 6-figure teaching job when I could, just try to juggle both? But it was just too much. And I'm glad that I left when I did. But now I'm able to really give 100% to the work that I do. Because I feel like, how am I trying to help people escape horrible workplaces and better their experiences when I'm not doing the same myself? And I'm stuck in an environment that is not helping me to advance. And so I felt like I was also living a lie in certain ways, is that I was like holding on to something that I knew was not good for me. So that has sort of been like my journey and my trajectory. But I know that there's many of us can relate and have similar sorts of journeys.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying like you had to pretty much practice what you were preaching. Like you had to model that to people. You also mentioned like, being a Black woman, I felt like I had to continue to pursue education. Otherwise, people would continue to like, scrutinize me or question my education. Did we all live like the same lives? I feel like I went through the same thing. And even with the doctorate, people like come at you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like in hindsight, I'm like, I did not need to get into 6-figure student loan debt. But like, knowledge is power. It's good to, have an education. But I, in hindsight, realized I didn't need to do all those things. And I know we've all felt like we had to be twice as good.
For sure, for sure. And it's exhausting at times. Yeah. Essay, can you tell us a bit more about what led into your work of developing the Black Employee Network group for the NFL?
Yeah, so like I said, there have been like a string of these police shootings of unarmed Black men. And, we would find ourselves like, hey girl, I need to take a walk. Like, can you walk outside with me? Or meeting at the water cooler, if you will, right? Or in the huddle, which is our cafeteria, and it's like, I'm not okay. You know what I mean? Like I'm angry. Nobody in my group is talking about what's going on. Um, and so I'm seeing all this. People are reaching out to me and I'm seeing everybody and like nobody was okay. But we didn't have a space at the time to talk about what was going on in the world and that we couldn't forget when we walked into, our jobs. And we also didn't know like where the NFL stood on these issues. And like we weren't hearing from the NFL and the commissioner. And so a few of us got together and I kind of led the charge on like, we need to create our own space. I'm like, why don't we have a space where it can be just us and we can talk about these issues and we can speak freely? Because a lot of us were angry at the time, right? And we needed a space to, how do we say we're angry? How do we voice our concerns about where this country is headed? And do it in the workplace because we spend a lot of time at work and we can't forget who we are just because we're at work. And then I just started researching like, really the NFL was my first job out of law school. So I didn't have a lot of experience working in big corporate or what other companies did. So I started researching like, what does NBC do? Like, my friend was working at Pepsi at the time. Like, hey, like, can you send me over like what groups you guys have? So I just literally started compiling because when I started asking leadership about it, they were like, oh, well, maybe we can do something for all minorities. And do we have to do something for Black? And so then I started, like, I just tapped into my lawyer mode where I'm like, oh, let me prove my case as to why everything I'm asking for is not new or revolutionary. It's shit that like companies have been doing for 20 years. And I strategically picked all of NFL's partners. So I was like NBC, CBS, PepsiCo, ESPN, like companies like Facebook, Twitter, like companies that the NFL has relationships with, and that also like they see as peers, right? I'm not going to pick some rinky-dink company where they're going to be like, oh well, we don't need to do what they do. I'm going to pick people that are on your level. And then my friends at the NBA were starting Dream in Color at the same time, which is their Black ERG. So sometimes you have to just fill a need, and I did it not just for other people, but I needed the space too. Like I needed a space where I can go and talk to people that have this unique experience of being Black, but also working in the NFL, and how those things work together, and how the NFL is dealing with things. Like nobody else is going to understand that unless you work in it. And so I did it just as much for myself as I did for the people that were going to come after me. Like I wanted them to come to an NFL that was better for them and more safe for them and more accessible to their community. And that's what led to it. And, it's still going strong, and it played a vital role during George Floyd. I had left at the time, but it was great to kind of just see how that group was able to show up for people during one of the most difficult times that I felt like we faced in recent, history.
I think what you're doing or what you did for the NFL is so pivotal, because what we found is that during the pandemic, when George Floyd was killed, a lot of people started Black employee networks. People had these initiatives for Black people. People started DE&I positions, but where they at now? Like where the emotion is going. Y'all not feeling as intense about this, but now that means the positions are gone. We're no longer having as many Black employee resource groups. But it sounds like what you implemented for the NFL is continuing to grow strong, which is where Chanelle comes in, because she currently is over the Black Employee Network or DE&I for specifically the Commanders. So based on Essay's work, Chanelle, I'm wondering if you can kind of like speak more to like what you're doing for the Commanders.
Yeah. So in the DEI realm of the Commanders, all of the ERGs fall under me. So I founded, through the guidance of Essay and through the support of some of my other peers of the Commanders, the Black Engagement Network, which then inspired our women's ERG. So now there's a women's initiative network, and 1 year later that inspired our Commanders Pride Network. And then that inspired our Somos Commanders, which is our Hispanic ERG. So right now we are one of few teams that has 4 ERGs, and they all roll up under DE&I. I also oversee the facilitation of DEI trainings. So we make sure that we have consistent trainings throughout the year. Also, just other programs and events throughout the year, such as some of our heritage observances or history observances, and any and everything you can think of in between. But yes, the role did come about like probably most of the other NFL and NBA DEI roles. It came about after George Floyd. And I will say that in this industry, you're noticing that more and more teams are having a dedicated person to run diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that the sentiment, sometimes it's like, oh, well, is it performative? Like, look, I don't care how y'all get me there. Just look, call me performative, but I'm doing the work. I'm in this position, and I'm here to do the work. So, yeah, we've been on full steam for the past few years.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you were able to accomplish with your position?
It's a lot. So I just mentioned that we went from 1 to 4 ERGs. Through that, though, I'm most proud of our ERG program, because employee resource groups is what retains some of the best talent and your diverse talent. So through this program, I'm able to pour into them, they pour into each other, and they're more likely to stay at the company, right? So automatically when you have ERGs, retention rates are higher, right? You start to recruit some of the talent externally because they see all the amazing things that you're doing internally, our LinkedIn posts, and they want to work for the Commanders. So I'll say that one of the most one of my proudest moments, or one of my proudest accomplishments with the Commanders, is developing that strong ERG program.
Yeah, I love that. She's being so humble right now. I thought you were going to go into the HBCU event that y'all.
Well, that's one small avenue, but okay, yeah. So we did an HBCU symposium in which we invited several HBCUs locally. We sourced candidates to come out, and they came, learned about sales. They heard from leadership in the team, and we hired some of them through that program. So
That's awesome.
programs like that. Thank you. Programs. What else am I missing?
Yeah, I don't know. You do a lot. I just be seeing
You
you.
tried to throw you the alley and you ain't even catch it. He's like, what else have you done?
I know she's trying to be humble. She didn't want to brag.
But that's Black women, right? Like Black women. And I think on one hand, we don't like to give ourselves credit, but I understand that because a lot of times when we do give ourselves credit, we're called cocky. We're, we're punished for it, right? And so it's like one thing I appreciate about Chanelle, she toots her own horn. And one, because you have to, because nobody is waiting to promote you. Nobody is waiting to see how great you are. Like, you know what? I'm losing sleep. We need to promote Chanelle. We need to give Chanelle her. Nobody's doing that. So you have to do it yourself. And like, I think a lot of people used to feel a certain type of way about me. Like, no, I'm going to get my credit because nobody's going to give my credit. Everything I did, I didn't reap any of the benefits of the work that I did. People are reaping those benefits now, like 5 years later. When I was fighting for people to be promoted, I was not being promoted, right? I was underpaid when I'm fighting the good fight for other people. And so it's just another example of like, we don't do a good job of promoting ourselves. I think Chanelle is one of the best at it. And I love that. Like, I love how she owns her success. And I try to do the same because the girls that are coming after us, they need to see that we can thrive in these spaces. But I also show the bad moments and I talk about the down moments and I talk about processing those things. But I think, Chanelle, like you do a great job of telling your story because not only is it going to help you further your career, it's also going to let other Black women that look like you, that come from where you come from, that went to Dell State, say, oh shit, like I can work at the Commanders and not just work there, like I can thrive because I see someone that looks like me thriving in that space. So we have to tell our own stories because nobody's going to do it for us. Nobody's waiting to give us our credit. That's me giving you your flowers.
That what you said was so true because I know I just read a study about how when Black employees specifically self-promote, they're penalized for it in the workplace, right? But when you go to career coaches, they're like, talk about all of your accomplishments. And they looked at Black employees, white employees, Latinx employees, Asian employees, and they found that specifically for Black employees, when we self-promote in the workplace, we're perceived less favorably for it. So I think that that's also an important reason why, particularly on social media, I think it's important to like toot our own horns and to do what Chanelle is doing and talk about the things that you've accomplished.
You have to.
Yeah. And even on, I would say on social media, like I think we see the remnants of how the study that you indicated that people are looked at as unfavorable. I find that especially when there are Black people, Black women who are confident in themselves, their accomplishments and their achievements, then you always gonna get somebody in the comments who try and humble you. Like
always.
So how do we continue to show up authentically while also like, promoting ourselves and promoting who we are and being proud of that without, being weighed down by what society tells us that we shouldn't be talking about this. You're too arrogant. How do we do that?
I just keep doing it because I feel like nobody's going to know what I'm doing if I'm like afraid to say, oh, I just did this. Oh, I just did that. And for me, I feel like I've been on social media for so long that even being on YouTube, you're always going to get the trolls and people who say things about you. So I think I've grown thick skin because of it. And I'm like, oh, there's always going to be like somebody saying something. But for the most part, I think anytime we promote ourselves or talk about the things that we're doing that we're happy about and proud of, we have our community of folks who are cheering us on. And so I think it's important to focus on those people. And like you said, like Essay, I believe, said, seeing that will help the people who come after us, right? And so we're not necessarily doing this right now for the folks who are watching us now, but somebody's watching us and seeing the things that we're doing and is inspired by that. So I just don't even respond. Like, I have a rule where I usually don't go back and forth on social media with trolls, because I feel like people do things to get a reaction out of us. So I just, it has to be a really compelling case for me to go back and forth. But I think it's important to, when you can, just try to tune it out, because people aren't going to know what you're doing unless you share it with them. And I think people, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, are happy for you and excited to see somebody in their network doing these things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm taking your advice. Sometimes them trolls be getting me. I try to.
You be going right back.
I like to go back and forth every now and then.
Right. Now and
a little, yeah. You gotta, a little
check 'em
going a little low, yeah. Sometimes I go lower.
Right. And then just go back and delete it later. Just want to make sure you saw it.
Oh, and I block everybody. So like the block tool is easily one of the best things. Like, I'm just gonna block you. Like,
I love that.
I'm fine with like healthy discourse, but if you're just coming like disrespectful, like, oh, like I'm gonna pop off and then I'm gonna block you, and then you'll never be able to respond to me again.
Exactly.
I love that. So I'm wondering, so as we're talking about like the need for us to continue to show our accomplishments so that more, especially Black women, are more inspired, I'm wondering, in the spaces that you ladies are functioning in, how are you pretty much like, what the saying is, like, as we reach forward, we reach back is the saying, I think. Yeah. So how do y'all kind of like function in that area? Because the concept of gatekeeping came up earlier in the conversation. So how do we ensure we're not engaging in that?
I mean, for me, anybody that reaches out, for the most part, I'm going to try to like make time, especially, young women of color, Black women that either want to know more about working in sports, want to be a lawyer. So many people made time for me. And I think, I may not be able to be everybody's like day-to-day mentor, but if I can give you 15, 30 minutes of my time, tell you my story, connect you with people, give you, advice here and there, I'm going to do it, because you never know the impact that can have on people. And I'm a big believer of, if you can see it, you can be it. And I want as many people to see me as possible, because I want people to see a Black woman lawyer who didn't change who she was, who didn't change how she talked. Because a lot of times we get into these roles and we think we have to disappear to get ahead. And it's like, if I just keep my head down and do my good work, somebody's gonna like think of me and push me ahead. And that's just not how the world works. So for me, one, just I try to be visible, and that's a part of me giving back. I try to tell my story, but also, make time, like even if it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes. But you also have to continue to grow your career, because with power comes influence. And so I think, don't take your eye off of the ball, because a lot of times we want to change things and we get so caught up in doing the work that we don't continue to get power. And one of the best pieces of advice I got, I was doing all this work at the NFL, and I was I was just walking around like I was Malcolm X. And one of my mentors was like, powerful white man, EVP, was like, you're trying to be the diversity girl, but the diversity girl has to get their budget approved by an executive that oversees revenue. So you just need to get into a position of power. And you can do that from a diversity standpoint, but the key is to be in a position of power, because you can't make change if you don't have power. And that resonated with me, where I was like, oh, I don't need to be the diversity person to make change. And if I want to be the diversity person, I need to get in a position of power. But I think a lot of times women, especially Black women, get stuck doing the work, and we're not moving our careers ahead. And so we're still having to get approval and buy-in from the people that have passed us on the ladder. And so I like to encourage people to get into a position of power, because you can always fight the fight, no matter if you work in diversity, sales, HR, whatever. But you have to be in a position of power. So you have to give and take, make time and be a woman of the people. But you need to make sure that your career is on track. And a lot of times we fight harder for other people than we fight for ourselves. And some of the fight is just take care of Chanelle, like take care of, Dr. Janice, like take care of yourself. Because the more you ascend, the more you can help people,
Well, you preaching to me right now. I don't know.
I think as SA brought up so many good points about I wish I was able to have the capacity to like mentor everyone who reaches out to mentor. But for me, I try to answer as many questions as I can. I am a firm, like staunch believer in not gatekeeping. One of my close friends, Kina, always says that the earth is round, right? And we don't have to compete for resources. And so I try to adopt that mindset of like, I'm not in competition with anyone else. I know that to create a world that is better, everyone needs to be doing this work. And so I actually want to imagine a world where this work becomes obsolete and we don't have to be, many of us would not, if the world was in a better place, would not be like actively wanting to engage in this work, right? I would rather be sitting under a tree writing. But, I feel like I want somebody to advocate for me if I were in these workplaces. So I want to be that person. But I think it's important to understand that we're not in competition with each other. And so I'm completely fine with like sharing resources and telling people will reach out to me and say, what do you charge? What are your prices? And I'm not like gatekeepy with that. I don't like to be like, oh, well, you have to figure it out. Like, no, I'll tell you everything and I'll help you as much as I can, because I feel like this work is so important. But I also feel like it's important to develop an abundance mindset and understand that like there's an abundant amount of resources available. And so as far as like all these companies and organizations need this work. So I, as one individual, cannot help every single workplace. So what good does it serve me to not tell people things and hide my prices and do all that? I believe firmly in price transparency, right? And telling people this is how much I charge for a workshop, because more than likely when I share my rates, that's when I've learned, oh, I'm undercharging myself or valuing my services. So I think that it's so important to be that person that you wish that you had. And also, I'm a tiny little bit petty. And I remember all the people I asked for to help me along the way who did not help me. And I know that many of them have been like, looked back and been like, that was one person I wish I would have held my hand out to. Yeah. So the petty in me also says, I know there's a saying, watch who you step on your way up. Or like those same people might be the same people you see on your way down. And I'm not saying be nice to people because of what you think you can gain from it, but you never know what helping someone will do for them and how that will impact their life. And also, I don't want to be that person that was just shut the door on somebody. So that's, the petty of me says that, but I also think like, we all need to be doing this work, and the world is round enough to where there's an abundance of whatever it is that we need. And I don't need to be competing with other people. So I think not gatekeeping is such an important part of that.
I love that. I know for me, I agree with both ladies. Anybody who reaches out to me on LinkedIn, I try to make time for. Like, it doesn't matter like how many people. I'm going to try to find the time, and it's usually a lot of inquiries. So I've started to streamline that process, and I made like a Calendly link where it allows them to lock in 15 minutes, a 15-minute time slot, so we can, get to know each other. But to that point, yes, I consider it a priority to like, as I'm pulling myself up, as SA is saying, as I'm gaining that influence in the corporate world, in the sport world, like I'm keeping that one hand behind me, making sure I'm pulling people behind me. So, I think that for me, mentorship is important because like there were so many people that has poured into me along the way. Like, who am I to tell somebody no? Who am I to like get too big headed where, I don't make time for them? What else? I also offer free resources to, individuals who would like to be in sport and entertainment. So I have a newsletter that I do, like where I give them advice. If I can't talk to you, you can, subscribe to my newsletter where you're getting advice. And it also lists open positions and all that good stuff. So I try to make myself available in various different ways.
That's dope. Now y'all got me.
You never know where people are going to end up. That is key. Like a lot of people, slept on me. Like I took an internship after law school and I was way behind a lot of my friends and peers, and I did an unconventional route. And then, fast forward and I'm ahead of most of my peers. And so you never know where people are going to end up. And there's people who I'm sure didn't think I was going to be where I'm at. And then there's people that I've seen and I'm like, damn, I'm glad I was nice to them, because when I met them, they were an intern or they were in a seasonal position. And like, they've just moved up. Like, even like Chanelle, when she reached out, I could have been like, no, figure it out. Right. And like, you were working in sales at the time and now you're leading D&I for the team. That wasn't your position when I met you. Right. And so that is something important to keep up. This is a relationship business. Mm-hmm. And so you never know where people are going to end up, and where you meet them is not, where necessarily where they end up. And so I think karma is also important too. Like to Dr. Janice's point, there's a lot of people who ignored me and then they had to take meetings with me because I was drafting their agreement, in a few years. And so it's like, oh, are you yeah, I'm Essie. I'm the one. Yeah, I hit you up when I was in law school. You never responded. Or when I was an intern, you never made time for me, but good to see you. Like, what do you need in your agreement? And so those moments are forever, fulfilling for me. But it's just a lesson. And some of the other best advice I got was treat everybody with the same level of respect, whether they're the janitor, whether they are the secretary. Because again, you never know where people are going to end up and who has relationships with people. And so that little person that's reaching out to you, you don't know where they're going to, end up. They could be, working with you one day, and they could have a relationship that you don't have. They could have access to something that you don't have, and you don't know that when they reach out. So even if you only have 15 minutes, one, just be kind to everyone, but also try to make the time, because you never know how it can pay off in the end.
You ladies are spitting so many facts right now. Y'all got me ready to go through my DM. Like, did I miss anybody?
I'm about to do the same thing.
Man, but we can't get to everybody. And that's the thing. I feel like as long as your heart is in the right place, it's just impossible to get to every person. There's kids that I meet and they're like, I emailed you a year ago, but I make time for them when I see them then. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, and so you can still, it can come back around, but it's hard. Especially with social media, because everybody
it is. You, right? The DMs give me so much anxiety because I'm like, that's how I missed our message. Because for me, I'm sure Essay, you have the same issue where I feel like people can be extractive sometimes and they reach out for things. And so that to me is like a lot where everyone is asking for something. And I understand that we all need help, but it's also like, I can't help a million people. So it's sometimes I just don't see things in the DMs or I miss them. So it's hard, and I can't like have an autoresponder that says, sorry, I missed your DM, So I hope people don't take it personally, but I know sometimes they do. They're like, oh, I messaged you. And
you could also
never
be going
responded.
through something. Like we go through so much. Like my mom passed in 2020. I was not a great mentor. I was not a great friend. Like I wasn't a great anything, for that time period. And so, but I also wanted to share that because there might have been people that didn't hear from me. And so like a lot of times we're fighting our own battles, whether we're trying to get promoted, whether we're trying to, get a new job or figure out our life or figure out our personal life. And I think a lot of people don't take that into account because we're everything to everybody. And, you have to give yourself grace. Like you might go through a year where you're just not a great friend or mentor, and that's fine. Like we're so hard on ourselves for not being everything to everybody. And it's like, I'm giving everyone permission to take time off.
right now I'm hearing this conversation going into grace and allowing ourselves to show grace to ourselves when we feel like, we don't have the capacity to reach out to everyone. So I love that, and I'm going to take that advice for myself.
Yeah. Gotta give
Oh,
yourself grace.
yes. Would you ladies mind letting us know where we can find you and anything that you guys have coming up?
Chanelle got something coming up. What you got coming up?
What do I have? Well, y'all can find me on all social media platforms at Chanelle S. Reynolds and www.chanellesreynolds.com. Where to find me, y'all? Your girl is going to the motherland next week, so I'll be in Africa. Really excited.
Ooh, where are you going? Ghana?
Johannesburg and Botswana.
Beautiful.
So really excited. Then I'll be there with Dr. Chanda.
Hey.
That's so cute. Y'all about to do a whole photo shoot. I already know it. I'll watch.
Period. You know who we are.
I'm here for it.
I already know.
I'm here. Well, for me, you could find me I'm on LinkedIn the most, so it's Janice Masari. On LinkedIn, I have a new book coming out, Decentering Whiteness in the Workplace. It's coming out in October. So if you find me on social media, you'll be able to find it, pre-order the book. Your support means the world to me. So thank you, ladies, for having us.
Yes.
And you can find me on Instagram at unapologetically_essay, spelled ESE. LinkedIn. I have a podcast coming out soon, much anticipated. But yeah, so I have some projects coming out, and it's gonna be a good year for me. I'm back on my shit.
I love it. I love it. First of all, like y'all were powerhouses. I'm so happy that y'all accepted the invitation here. It is definitely a pleasure to host y'all. Yeah, so y'all know y'all can come back whenever. Open invite all day. Like, just let me know.
Thank you.
Yes, and for the listeners,
yes,
of course.
Thank you.
And for the listeners out there, you guys can catch every episode, the audio version on Wednesdays and the video version on Thursdays. And don't forget, you have the power to create the emotions that you want to experience. God bless. See y'all next week. Bye.